We are ready.
Hey everybody, welcome to our video today. So glad that you could join us. We'll have more in just a few moments, some more music and message and all that sort of stuff coming up. Really, it's gonna be really great. I just want to draw your attention to one thing that's coming up this week. You may not have realized, but Friday, this coming Friday, is actually Good Friday. And we want to do something that we have never done before, probably you've never done before. What we want to do is we want to get together virtually, as many of us as possible, on Zoom. So we're going to have a Good Friday observance on Zoom. I know that sounds crazy, but hey, these are crazy times, right? So one of the things that we'd like to do is, one, we're going to meet at 7 p.m., but we're going to have communion together on our Zoom meeting, okay? So you'll want to make sure you have some bread and some wine or juice, whichever you want to use, that's fine, whatever is your preference. Make sure you have those, because we're going to do that together, and in order to fully participate, that's something you'll want to have. So fair warning, you have time to get any of that sort of stuff, and we're going to have that time together. I'm going to send out an email on Wednesday or Thursday with more specific instructions and the link for the meeting, how we're going to do that, when, all that kind of stuff. If you do not receive our emails already, and we have been sending out emails recently to keep you informed and keep you in the loop, because we don't get to see each other in person, you can get on that list by writing to me at info@citychurchwarsaw.org. Right there. I'll put it right there. And so you can copy that. It's really easy. Info and then citychurchwarsaw.org. All right. That's all you have to remember. So if you write there, you'll get on the email list, and you'll hear from us to get the email in order to just join in on Friday. All right. So we're gonna keep going right now, and we'll see hopefully you on Friday.
On March 15th, Polish government announced that it's closing borders due to the spread of coronavirus, or known otherwise as a disease COVID-19. And this announcement came in shortly after announcement of closing schools, restaurants, cafes, shopping centers, or the public places. And as discomforting as it sounded at first, it really made me feel safe. It just sounded like a good thing to do and a safe thing to do. And I believe that at this point, we all were looking for some safety and security measures for our families, for ourselves, for our countries. But the next day, the Canadian government has announced that Canada is now closed too. And I had a major emotional meltdown. Well, let me pause that story for you here a little bit and back it up by 35 years. I grew up in a communist Poland. And one of the big issues was that we really had very limited possibility to travel. First, our passports were held by the government, and every time you wanted to go somewhere, you needed to request the release of your document. And you were allowed to have your passport only for the time that you traveled. When you came back, you returned it to the special office. And we were allowed to travel only to certain countries that were in so-called Soviet bloc or Eastern Bloc. So only within the countries that were under the influence of Soviet Union. But at the same time, I grew up watching some Western TV. I watched series like Columbo and Kojak and later on Miami Vice. And everything was so vibrant in the Western cultures. Everything was so colorful and so free. Something I did not have in Poland. I still remember as a kid watching news and listening to Radio Free Europe for news from Poland about students and Polish workers fighting for freedom and rebelling against Soviet and communism influence in our country. So let's fast forward again. When Canadian government announced that the borders are now closed to non-Canadian citizens, and I am not a Canadian citizen, I am married to a Canadian citizen, my kids are Canadian citizens, but I am not a Canadian citizen. My emotions gave in. Everything in me reminded me of the lack of freedom I had when I was growing up. And again, I felt like this teenage girl who was trapped. I felt like my dreams were crushed, my hopes were crushed. I felt like all my perspectives were taken away from me again. This summer, my family had plans. We were to go to the US, every 2 years we go to visit family and friends in Canada and in the States, and we travel. And this is an amazing time of being together and getting some of that Northern American air into us. The kids look forward to it. I look forward to it. And this year, this was the year we were supposed to go. But we couldn't because coronavirus shut down the borders. My dreams were crashed. My plans were crashed. My kids' dreams were crashed. Peter Scazzero, in his book, Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, says this: loss marks the place where self-knowledge and powerful transformation happen if we have the courage to participate fully in the process. Let me read this again for you. Loss marks the place where self-knowledge and powerful transformation happen if we have the courage to participate fully in the process. Loss and grief, they go together. Grief, we associate usually with physical death. We usually talk about grief when someone dies. That's how we define loss. That's how we enter into grief. But we feel grief every time we experience any kind of loss. When we face other deaths in our lives. The world at large is in a lockdown. Our little worlds are in a lockdown. Our individual worlds are now shut down. We self-isolate, we are social distancing, we are avoiding human contact. We are stripped of our routines, our daily structures, our businesses as usual, our predictable incomes, our plans, dreams, breakfasts with friends and coffees at our favorite cafes. Maybe your loss right now is that job that you were supposed to start, the dream one that you were waiting for a long time. And now you can't start it and you don't even know if you're going to have it when this is all over. Maybe your loss is your elderly parents who are somewhere far away from you and you cannot do much to help them and to be there with them or for them. Our lives as we know them have been interrupted. And our interruptions are experienced now globally, collectively. We can allow those losses to crush us, or we can allow them to open us up to the new possibilities. See, this massive interruption in our daily lives creates a tension in us. And as humans, we really don't like living in the tension. In art, in order to really build a successful story, whether in a book, whether it's with the notes in a musical piece, or with choreography pieces in a dance performance, there is always a tension buildup. Because this tension creates in us the primal need for resolve. We long for clarity. We long for balance. We long to have peace. See, there is actually one thing you need to know about me is that I don't do tension well. And when the plot in a story gets really, really twisted and my favorite characters get a little lost, I cannot handle the high tension. So what I actually used to do, I would go to the end of the book. I will read how the story ends. And then when that tension in me was resolved, I was able to come back to where I left off and finish the story. I wanted to get out of the yucky feeling. I wanted to get through it as fast as possible and do not want to go through it slowly. But to process loss and to process grief, we need to go through it, not just get over it. See, often we experience loss. When we experience loss, we engage all kinds of defenses. We deny or we minimize what's happening to us. Or we're looking for someone to blame. Very often we blame ourselves or we blame God. We're analyzing, over-intellectualizing. We're looking for answers and for data and for information, for facts to avoid addressing the really difficult feelings that we are actually feeling, to address our personal awareness of what's going on. We become hostile. We are over-spiritualizing. Some of us are really good at it, at throwing God is in control when everything in us aches and we're actually questioning if God is in control. And then we over-medicate, we numb. And you know what that can look like. It could be shopping It could be scrolling down your social media. We're doing everything in our power to avoid the tension of our feelings. We hide behind those defenses because we really hope it will all go away. But the truth is, it will not go away. Only if we enter into this place of discomfort, we'll be able to break through and experience hope and experience peace. To face our losses in a healthy way, to process grief, we need to do our human work and give God full opportunity to bring real healing. To do our human part, to name what we're feeling, to sit in the discomfort is our really responsibility. See, the Bible is full of stories of people who experienced horrible loss and horrible pain. When we look at those stories, we see raw, honest, authentic, pour out of the hearts before God. Book of Psalms that we usually turn to for comfort is full of lamentations. Actually, 1/3 of this book is about fear, pain, anxiety, loss. We find statements like this: I cry out to the Lord. I lift up my voice to the Lord for mercy. I pour out before him my complaint. Before him, I tell my trouble. Or, hear my prayer, Lord. Let my cry for help come to you. Do not hide your face from me when I am in distress. Turn your ear to me when I call. Answer me quickly. And the author continues, for my days vanish like smoke. My bones burn like glowing embers. My heart is blighted and withered like grass. I forget to eat my food. In distress, I groan out loud, and I am reduced to skin and bones. See, there is actually a whole book in the Old Testament that's called Lamentations. And it's a collection of poems and deep mourning over the conquest of Jerusalem and the kingdom of Judah. King David lamented after death of his friend Jonathan and his father Saul. He commanded the people to learn this lament and sing it. And then we get to Jesus. See, the end of his earthly life, his ministry, his 3 years of ministry here on earth, was a huge loss for his disciples. But Jesus experienced enormous loss and enormous anxiety as well, an overwhelming sadness and fear. When Jesus, right before he was arrested, and he let the guards, Roman guards and Jewish authorities arrest him right before his crucifixion, he went with few of his closest friends to the Garden of Gethsemane. It was a city garden in Jerusalem. He went to pray, and he took his friends with him, 3 closest ones. And before he stepped away alone by himself to pray, he shared with them how he feels. He said, my soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. My soul is overwhelmed with sadness to the point of death. See, to address and enter into grief, you need to first really get vulnerable and admit that you are afraid. C.S. Lewis, in his book Grief Observed, wrote, I didn't realize that grief feels like fear. This current situation is really taking a great toll on our emotions. Personally, I am afraid I'm developing social phobias. This was an issue for me before. And right now, I am afraid every time I leave the house that I'm going to meet someone. Last Sunday, I had a major anxiety attack, a panic attack where I fell apart because I had to leave the house to pick up a package from an in-post box. And I panicked that I am going to see people. See, it is okay for you and I to be afraid. Jesus was afraid. He was overwhelmed with sadness. And we can't change what we don't admit, what we don't notice. So the first step is becoming more aware of what you're feeling, especially when those feelings are intensely negative. Naming your emotions gives you the power to respond to what's happening around you. It actually, grieving without naming grief, without naming what you're feeling, is impossible. You need to pay attention to your sadness and to your anger. Secondly, don't go through it alone. See, any powerful transformation, in order to be sustainable, requires what neuroscientists call therapeutic relationship. What it means is bring into your grieving process your closest friend, your spouse, your body, your mentor or coach if you have one. Remember Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. He was not alone. He brought 3 of his closest friends with him, and he told them how overwhelmed he was, and he asked them to pray with him. When in the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus cried out in anguish to his Father, and he prayed 3 times the same prayer. He found peace. His prayers ended with, "Not my will, but your will be done." This is not a prayer of resignation. This is a prayer of peace and hope. We live in a new reality. And even if we know it's temporary, it doesn't feel less scary. We didn't plan for it. We didn't prepare for it. We didn't expect it. And we surely don't know how long it's going to last. So it is natural that we are overwhelmed with emotions. And there is hope in this time of confusion and unknown. When you choose to be deliberate about the practice of grief and you lament your losses, God will meet you there. And you will see a change happening in you. And you will find strength and you will find hope. You may not find all the resolve to the tension you're feeling, but you will find the tenderness of your Heavenly Father. And He will be there with you without judgment and no condemning you, but hearing your cry out and bringing hope and healing as you let go of the way things were. And as you let go of what used to be, you will create space for the new things to come. New acts of kindness, new expressions of loving one another, new expressions of creativity. And I can almost guarantee you new, deepened relationship with your Heavenly Father. Last week, Mike asked you to share with your friends, what are you hopeful for? This week, I would like to ask you to share with your closest friends, maybe with your spouse. What are your losses? Tell your husband, tell your wife what you are grieving and ask them. Invite them into this conversation and invite God into this grieving process. And be still. The end.